Welcome to This Explainer. I am so incredibly excited you're here today because, well, we're going to unpack what is arguably one of the most transformative leaps in all of human history. Seriously, we're taking a journey from the days of those massive, heavy, car-tethered brick phones to the sleek, pocket-sized extensions of our minds that we use literally every single day. Because think about it, the mobile revolution didn't just hand us cool new gadgets, it fundamentally rewired how we live, work, and connect as a global society. So, let me ask you something. How many invisible handshakes did your phone make just to load this explainer? Have you ever actually stopped to think about that? In mere fractions of a second, there is this vast, silent symphony of data, an invisible architecture operating right around our heads. It's coordinating frequencies, communicating with towers, pinging global servers. It feels like pure magic, right? But it's actually the result of decades of absolutely brilliant engineering. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the invisible cellular grid. Second, the touchscreen paradigm shift. Third, the rise of the platform economy. And finally, number 4, the always connected society. All right, section 1, the invisible cellular grid, building the foundation. You know, before we could have stuff like apps and streaming video, engineers had to solve a really massive problem. How do you connect millions of moving people when you only have a super limited number of radio frequencies? Well, the solution they came up with is actually what gave the cell phone its name. Back in the 1940s and 50s, researchers at Bell Labs, brilliant minds like Douglas H. Ring and W. Ray Young, conceptualized this thing called cellular architecture. See, instead of building one giant towering radio antenna to cover a whole city, which, by the way, would use up all the available frequencies almost instantly, they proposed dividing geographic areas into much smaller regions. They called these regions cells, and each cell would get its own low-power base station. This was a massive conceptual breakthrough. It meant you could reuse the exact same radio frequencies over and over in different cells that were miles apart. It's like a giant puzzle that suddenly allowed for thousands of simultaneous users. They essentially mapped out an invisible grid all around us. So, let's look at how this all actually evolved. We kick things off in the early 20th century when Guglielmo Marconi pioneers basic wireless radio technology. But, as you can imagine, getting from those basic, clunky wireless setups to a phone you can casually walk around with, that took decades of relentless semiconductor miniaturization. The real watershed moment finally hit in 1973. That's when Martin Cooper, working at Motorola, stepped right onto a busy New York City street and made the very first public handheld mobile call. I mean, what a moment. He completely proved that human communication no longer needed to be tethered to a wall or a desk. Theoretical physics had officially become an untethered, practical reality. But here is the tricky part. What actually happens when you move? This was the crucial technical challenge that had to be solved, and it was tackled by the rise of 2G networks in the 1990s. And, quick side note, 2G is also what introduced the SMS text message by figuring out how to encode voice into binary digital data. But back to moving. They created a process called the handover. Imagine you're walking or driving, and you get close to the edge of your current cell. Behind the scenes, sophisticated algorithms are constantly, frantically, calculating your signal strength. In fractions of a second, binary data silently and seamlessly transfers your connection from your current tower to the next one over, completely without dropping your call. It's literally an invisible relay race, and the baton is your data, happening right there in your pocket. Moving on to Section 2, the touchscreen paradigm shift. Reimagining the interface. So right around the early 21st century, the mobile phone goes through this wild metamorphosis. It goes from a simple, basic voice tool into a genuinely powerful, integrated computing platform. Think back to before 2007. We had these things called personal digital assistants, or PDAs, but let's be honest, they were pretty limited. They had these disjointed interfaces, tiny little screens, and those super clunky physical keyboards where you had to peck at the keys with a little plastic stylus. But then, Apple introduced the iPhone in 2007. Steve Jobs had this driving philosophy that advanced technology shouldn't just be powerful. It needed to be elegantly intuitive. He wanted to completely tear down the barrier between us, the users, and the digital world itself. And the absolutely crucial point here is exactly how they achieved that. The game changer was the capacitive touchscreen. See, older screens basically required you to use physical, mechanical pressure to register a touch. You really had to press down. But a capacitive screen, totally different ballgame. When you touch your phone today, you aren't just mashing your finger against glass. You are actually physically disrupting an invisible electrical field that's running continuously across that surface. It's kind of wild to think about. And because of that, it allowed for these highly responsive multi-touch gestures, pinching, zooming, and swiping. Essentially, your own finger became the ultimate stylus. Now, beneath that electrically charged glass lies an absolute marvel of miniaturization. It's called the system on a chip, or SoC for short. Engineers somehow managed to take the central processing unit, the graphics processor, and the communication interfaces, and smush them all together onto one single tiny semiconductor package. I mean, they literally packed an entire computer into a chip, no bigger than your thumbnail. And that little chip drives the whole shebang with just mind-blowing efficiency. Which brings us to Section 3, Rise of the Platform Economy, Apps, APIs, and Digital Labor. So, by 2008, the physical hardware was looking great. But as we all know, a device is really only as good as what you can actually do with it. The introduction of the App Store, and soon after Google's open Android operating system, transformed these phones from mere tools into fully programmable platforms. And this fundamentally changed the global economy forever. The whole ecosystem kind of neatly divided itself into 3 distinct layers. Down at the base, you've got the hardware, that's your SoC and capacitive screens handling the physical interaction. Right in the middle is the software framework layer. This is the App Store and Android OS acting as an open platform for developers to distribute their work. And sitting at the very top, you have the cloud services layer. This is where your social media and gig economy apps live, coordinating all that remote data. This 3-layered structure is exactly what put a super powerful node of the global information network straight into the pockets of billions of us. Okay, but how on earth do all these different layers talk to each other without everything just crashing or getting hacked? Enter the API, the Application Programming Interface. Let's break down this invisible magic for a second. Let's say your favorite ride-sharing app needs your location. It doesn't just bully its way in and take over your phone's GPS circuitry. No way. Instead, the app politely makes a request to the API. Then, the API securely queries your device's GPS hardware on the app's behalf. Finally, the hardware returns that location data back through the API to the app. It's a brilliant system. It ensures everything plays nicely together without giving any single app the power to just hijack your entire device. And because this whole app ecosystem was built so seamlessly, it triggered a massive phenomenon known as network effects. If you haven't heard of it, it's basically when a service becomes way more valuable simply because more people are using it. Think about it for a second. A ride-sharing app is literally useless if there are 0 drivers on the road, right? And conversely, drivers aren't going to use the app if there aren't any riders looking for a lift. But once an app hits that magical critical mass, boom, the idea spreads like wildfire. This specific principle is the engine that fueled the entire gig economy, and it's what led to the massive dominance of those few huge platform companies that now mediate so many of our daily economic interactions. Now, holding all of this up like massive invisible pillars are cloud computing and advanced algorithms. Yes, your phone is incredibly powerful, but the real heavy lifting, that's actually happening miles away on remote servers. Data gets sent out, crunched, and zipped back to your screen in literal fractions of a second. This tech is coordinating absolutely massive, complex logistical networks for instant transport and delivery all over the world. And meanwhile, social platforms are constantly analyzing our behavioral signals, every single like, every scroll, even how long you pause on a photo, all to perfectly personalize our content feeds. It's safe to say this data-driven innovation has completely, totally reshaped our everyday habits. Whether we're booking a flight for next week or just ordering Thai food for tonight, these digital platforms have made modern economic organization completely instant and continuous. Moving on to our final section, number 4, the always connected society, the networked self. So with the global deployment of high-speed 3G, 4G, and now the rollout of 5G networks, we really have to zoom out and look at the ultimate culmination of all this technology on human civilization itself. The real backbone of this continuous, always-on connection is something called packet switching architecture. Okay, imagine a high-res photograph you want to send to a friend across the world. The network doesn't just awkwardly shove it through the pipes as one giant file. Nope, it chops that image up into thousands and thousands of tiny little data segments, or packets. And here is the craziest part. These packets travel completely independently of one another. They bounce across global fiber optic lines, taking totally different routes under oceans and across continents, before finally magically reassembling in perfect order right there in the palm of your friend's hand. This invisible choreography is exactly what enables the continuous, real-time synchronization of our entire modern world. And the societal impacts of this, they are absolutely profound. We literally have real-time synchronization of information happening globally right now. In a lot of developing regions, a simple mobile connection is frequently the primary and sometimes the only gateway to critical life-saving services like education, modern healthcare, and banking. It's actively working to bridge the digital divide.
Plus, look at how it's completely transformed global citizen journalism. Today, any citizen equipped with a smartphone can hit record and instantly share a world-changing event on a global stage. The power dynamic has totally shifted. But of course, this profound systemic shift brings up some intense new realities for us to grapple with. Just think about this for a second. For almost the entirety of human history, messages traveled super slowly. Communication was, by its very nature, intermittent. You sent a letter and you waited. But today, the boundaries between our periods of connection and disconnection have become totally blurred, if not erased altogether. We now live in an always connected society. And honestly, this raises some incredibly deep philosophical questions about our personal attention spans, our individual autonomy, and even our very identity in a world where we are quite literally tethered to the digital realm 24/7. And here is the kicker, the real reason why this matters more today than ever before. This constant connectivity, it's really not just a communication tool anymore. It has become the new infrastructure. Because every single tap, every casual swipe, every little GPS ping generated by billions of mobile devices all day long, all of that data now serves as the foundational training ground for artificial intelligence. Our completely ordinary, daily digital habits are directly fueling massive intelligence systems. Systems that are, right now, beginning to automate major decision-making across the entire globe. Which leaves us with one final, deeply vital question to ponder before we wrap up. As AI and these complex algorithmic systems continue to deepen our digital integration, steering us toward a future where the human and digital worlds are just inextricably linked, where exactly does the network end and the self begin? It's a lot to think about, right? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. Keep wondering, keep learning, and I will see you next time.